Hello and welcome back to another segment of What's Up with Nick and Chuck. I am Andy, the marketing guy from HUI, and today I have several people with me that I'd like to introduce. As always, I have Nick Rolfe and Chuck Schwartz, our medical business development directors here at HUI.
Hey everybody.
Hey everyone.
We'd also like to welcome back Mark Collins, our applications engineer for our medical team.
Hey.
Last but not least, we have a special guest with us today. She was HUI's first industrial designer and helped create our medical design and project management methodologies. She has worked with HUI on everything from crash carts to veterinary anesthesia. So with that, we would like to welcome to the show Julia Behm.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me today.
Hey Julia.
Julia, tell us about your career with HUI in terms of maybe from when you started to where you are today with us in terms of your industrial design background and just give the audience kind of an idea of the work you've done with us.
Sure. So actually when I came to HUI, I was hired in project management, and at the time HUI was doing a lot of industrial product design and a little bit of medical product design. And so I came into the project management side of things with some experience from larger companies that were doing stage-gated processes and brought some of that here. And when I saw what was happening with the medical design, I got very excited because that was a big opportunity for an industrial designer to do something with more style and some real functional challenges that you could really sink your teeth into. So.
Very cool. So one of the things that I think is going to be interesting for our audience to understand is when it comes to the upfront, like getting things started, Chuck and I will go out and meet with clients, right? And often, we will transition into a concept stage, and that's where we get involved with you. And from there, there's always this initial kickoff meeting, and I think it'd be really helpful for our audience to understand what do they need to bring to the table to make that kickoff meeting a success.
Sure. One of the processes that we've developed, the features and functions document, helps to kind of lay out what those initial requirements might be, and that can be really helpful. When you first start, you're dealing with a core group of people that really understand the technology and come from different specialties inside that company. Or maybe just one individual that has a really deep understanding of what the product requirements are. So we start to gather it with the features and functions and with a cross-functional team from HUI, but depending on the complexity of the system, might also recommend some additional either design research or ethnographic research so that we can look for problems. You're really doing more of like a problem finding than problem solving in that first stage. So for industrial design, the funnel at the beginning is so big. It's more of a, let's see what the blue sky holds at that point. And we look at the surgical field and see if we can make observations about what they're doing that they don't even know what they're doing. So we might go in and see they're putting the canisters, in one case we did a surgical observation where they were taking the canisters of the biomaterial and putting it like on a windowsill. And I said, well, why are you doing that? Why is that? Tell me about what you're doing here. And discover there's not like a place to put it on the cart. So if you can take that, they may not know that they want to put it there, but by watching it and observing it, you can find a way to make just a simple metal bracket or something that gives that system more functionality in a way that's cost effective. So it sometimes feels like you're putting a lot of additional cost into a project when you're doing the research, but it can serve your end product really well.
I'm also always amazed that when we have those features and functions meetings and coming out of that, right? Like there's obviously we're filling out our documentation and either you're at the meeting or you're over the phone, and what I find interesting is how you will take that information and come back with 3 to 5 concepts. Yet there's nothing visually laid out for you. All you've done is really interviewed them and gathered some ideas, and maybe they have some rough images of other types of products, but I guess how do you go from How do you go from taking that information and coming to the table with 3 to 5 concepts? What's that secret?
I think it is a lot of understanding and like waiting to solve. Like I'm not putting pen to paper until I really understand what the needs are. So it's very helpful when the right people and the right information come in the very beginning. But like you mentioned competitive research, I'll do my own competitive research too to see how we can differentiate the look of it and make it look like something that fits in their brand family, that makes sense aesthetically in that environment, that makes sense, but also like stands out in a good way. You don't want it to be tacky or too space agey in something that's maybe a little bit more of a subdued type of environment, like a nursing home or something. So it has to be the right fit and stands out from what's available on the market.
Julia, you had mentioned the right people in the room. So like some of the viewers are actually going to be the OEM device manufacturers, and when they take and go through product development, who are some of those right people that need to be in that room with you?
It's funny, like we talked about the core group of people that are going to be there that are filling out that features and functions. So we're meeting those people in the beginning. It's usually there's marketing and engineering and everybody that would typically be there, but it can be helpful to see people that might not be in that room. Like, where's the customer service person that can tell us about the common replacement parts or things that are failing in the field, or even the guy or gal that's loading the truck. Like, where are they grabbing the product and how are they touching it and how is that impacting them? Those little things, if you can talk to more people in the beginning, you can create some really nice pieces of innovation.
Nice. I think for our audience's benefit, I want to transition a little bit over to the relationship between Mark and Julia, or Mark and industrial designer, because Mark is our applications engineer at HUI, and when it comes to solving problems or when we have complex situations within a product, Mark really brings that expertise in to help bring the industrial design into the engineering perspective, so it's we can make it right. And so I'd like to spend a little bit of time talking about that relationship and how the two of you work together.
Sure.
Sometimes it's kind of challenging, right? Because I've always kind of looked upon my job as making Julia's dreams come true, right? Like whatever she can imagine on paper.
Can you make it blow square bubbles?
Exactly, right? And I have to think sometimes quite a bit just to figure out how to make that happen. So there's a lot of back and forth, I would say. Sometimes it's really frustrating, and sometimes it's really easy. The biggest, the most amazing part of the process is, I think, when we do it really fast, where we end up coming to a concept meeting and there's 5 concepts that we show them, and then we have them mix and match right away.
Yes.
It blows my mind. You're the fastest industrial design I've ever seen, right? Like, we will be alone in a room for hours, 3-4 hours, and you'll take the feedback that you got and transform that, right, into a final concept or 2 final concepts. And I'm kind of curious on your perspective of that, as far as, do you enjoy that? Like,
Oh, I do. I love it, actually. That's like the fun part, right? And I think it's really good as an industrial designer. Like, I don't want to put things out there into the world that don't work, right? Like, so it's good. It's kind of an ideal situation for me to work with talented engineers who can like give you confidence that those types of mechanisms that they will work, or to kind of that kind of feeds back and forth, where I say, well, I want it to move in this way. You say, well, what if we did this? Like, you put a hinge here. Okay, I can do that. So then we do this, and then skin it that way. You're creating form and function kind of at the same time, and it does happen really fast when you're brainstorming and sketching and putting that in the computer, and then you can show people and they can tell you. If you have decision makers in the room, it goes like that.
It's crazy, right? Like, the best projects I've ever been on are projects where you have a mix and match meeting and people come back at the end of the day and it goes so fast where people actually, it's kind of like they remember that, oh yeah, that was my idea. Versus you come back a week later and you show it to them, they're like, man, that's not really what we were looking for.
Right.
But if you can show it to them 3 hours later,
And it can be very difficult to get those right people in the room in the first place. So, we're asking for companies to come to us with, their best representative from their engineering department in a very highly specialized field, and a marketing person, and a upper level sales rep, and all these different people, and you've got them in one room. That's not gonna happen like that many times. So you need to go fast and get that done.
Yeah.
So Julia, from your perspective, obviously, you've worked with Mark for a long time. Talk to us about, and not just Mark, but engineers, what's the most frustrating thing that they bring to the table where you're like, man, if you would just...
How often does Mark crush your hopes and dreams?
Yeah.
He claims to want to fulfill my hopes and dreams. But I don't know. I think it's hard to see companies skip design. I think that is hard, because I know that we could do it just a little better if they would give us a half a chance to just kind of mold it and shape it and make it a little bit softer on the edges, a little different material choices and things. And I know that engineering can take and fulfill that functionality amazingly, but you want to see it done in a way that's also touch friendly and aesthetically pleasing. So I admire the functionality, but it needs to be the three corners. It's got to have the aesthetics and the cost and the functionality all together to be a good design for me.
Yeah. And I'm convinced that, I go back to one single project where we worked on a base, and we kept finishing the base, going back to Julia, and she had these slight changes, right? And I think we actually had time, we weren't crunched for time, so we had a little extra time to put forth to it. And that particular base, just working out all the little teeny details that drove us crazy from an engineering department, is probably one of the best bases we've ever had, where people come to it and say, wow, I really like that base, right? And you're like, yeah, thanks. What about the other part of the car? Right? But yeah, it's true.
The amazing part that goes up and down, anything about that? Yeah.
But it's those finite details that, it really makes that product stand out.
And
Right.
Yeah.
There's something about a well-designed product that aesthetically looks good and has that feel to it where you want that to be in your environment, and you're not going to just go hide it in a closet. So at the end of the day, to me, it's definitely worth it to spend the time.
In the example of that base, right? That base is a tooled up base, right? So they're already investing in that base, taking that extra time to put in those extra curves and to really get that detail down. You're spending the money anyway.
When you know your materials and processes, you know what you can achieve in any given process. Why not take advantage of that?
Yeah.
And I would say even before you tool up on that base, you have a couple options of different ways you can go, and they didn't want to go with the most expensive route, but ultimately at the end of the day, seeing the sketch, seeing how the final product looks, they go back to their sales team and decide that it's worth it. That's when you know that the design really is.
Yeah.
It's good. Let's talk about the differences between trying to collect information
And being
in person versus over the phone.
Yeah.
Right? And just be honest.
Yeah, I think that being in person can definitely make things easier, especially if you're talking about a large group of people. Because on the phone, there's going to be people that are, not engaged if they're not the one that's talking, or they're not going to listen. Where you're going to get some benefit just from the communications of all the people that are in the room with each other, let alone not even necessarily related to the project. But if they're listening to each other, they might understand why, you need that and I need this, and those things are at cross purposes, and we have to make a decision. Maybe that's not something that I can even decide, really.
But help facilitate.
But yeah, we can kind of at least have the conversation there to make those decisions.
How often do you come away from features and functions or a collection meeting, data collection, and you have absolutely no idea which direction to go? That
never happens. No, I think I
suppose
always have some idea. I mean, there may be, some of the cross-fighting between departments that makes it difficult to decide which way. So sometimes you have to provide wildly diverse concepts so that they can continue to fight it out.
Yep.
Like, you know that sales want something that's like just really futuristic, and they want all these features, and they think they can sell it, but you know, maybe at the end of the day that's not going to be cost effective, or you know, there's just different issues with it, or people in the field are not happy with some of the features. They're just going to fight. So you have to give them all those things. Well, what if, you know, it was a expanding closet, and what if it was a pole that went up and down, which, you know, can we mix and match those a little bit?
Try to find the happy medium.
Can we do that without, you know, making it a yard sale? Can we try to, right? Like, you don't, sometimes that I guess is a struggle. Sometimes too many cooks in the kitchen can be a problem. So I would tend to err on the side of like, let's get all of the opinions and then try to make the right decisions through the process to get to the best solution. But sometimes design by committee can end up poorly. So it's a little dangerous.
What about scope creep? How do you deal with scope creep as a designer? Like, what are your frustrations with it? How do you rein it back?
How often do you think it happens?
I think scope creep seems like it happens more often when the right people aren't involved at the beginning. Because then you have these concepts that hopefully they don't get all the way to like a prototype or something before somebody realizes that they were never in, and they didn't get to, at that point they're pretty mad, and then they don't like it, and it's just a no.
Yeah.
I think if you uncover things along the way, you have to be prepared for change, and that's why sometimes that's just part of the process. You build it in. You want to check back at each stage. Well, did we miss anything? Do we need to come back and add a little bit here? Are we going to tweak it? Sometimes it's when you test it and the cycle testing, and that just totally doesn't work, so we have to go a different direction.
How often do you come to a meeting where in your lineup of concepts, you have one in there that was kind of just thrown in last minute, and you thought, they'll never go for this, but I'm just going to throw it in there anyways because it's got some interesting ideas in it, and they go for it?
Oh, isn't that the pain, right? You think, oh, pick this one, it's beautiful. This is the one, pick this one, you know, but you can't get too attached to it. I think that's kind of like a rookie move, right? And that was definitely, I think, early in my career, something you get really attached to. Like, this, I believe in it. I made it because I think this is a good solution. I want to solve these problems for you. Like, that's why I do this. But sometimes they don't go that way. So I think it's just important to make sure that everything you put out is consistently something that you can stand behind. Like, don't do it if you think it's truly a bad idea. Don't do it.
We often talk about when we go see customers, right? Like, we're talking about in the concept stage, we're designing with price in mind, right? We're designing with a target price in mind. How do you, as an industrial designer, and even when you were with HUI, you were doing some quoting and estimating as well. How do you balance the target price with we need to create something beautiful, sexy, sleek?
Yeah, it only works for me if it hits all the points. Like, I think one of the most interesting things is to figure out what you can do with certain processes. Like, you have to start from there. What processes make sense to go visit like those manufacturers and see, well, how do we do this urethane casting? How do we, like, how does that work? What can we do with it? Is that going to make sense? If you make something that's beautiful and it works, but it costs $1 million, you failed. That's just not a good design. It has to be, and if it works and it costs very little, but it looks like that also is a fail. So it has to be all three. Yeah.
Excellent.
So I was just kind of curious, more so like, how can industrial design work the best, or when does it not work? Like how is it hard or good for engineering? Are there?
Well, I mean, certainly, I would tell you that one of the benefits or the joys of having an industrial designer is that the concepts are put forth for you. So your challenges are more, you kind of take away the aesthetic part of it, right? So, like I love blue sky stuff, but a lot of people really would like a direction, right? And so the industrial design gives you a direction, right? So it's more efficient, right? Like if I give an engineer a project that is super blue sky, right? Like here are the requirements, give me something. I feel like it's really slow at first. But having that direction, right, makes things so much smoother.
Kind of like a little super booster.
Yeah. Yeah.
As long as it doesn't go too far in the wrong direction.
Exactly. But I would say that, sometimes the very frustrating part of, like, you'll work with an industrial designer and you'll get concepts rolling, and especially if it's a mechanism, right? You're trying to think of, like, how am I going to make that work cheaply? And then sometimes you have some good ideas of how it might work, but then you start talking about reliability. And so you don't really want to kibosh anything. You don't want to say absolutely not. But it's trying to find a balance. Yeah, it's the balance of like, yeah, that's a great idea. I know we can make it work, but it's going to double their budget for that portion of the cart.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
those are probably some frustrations, right?
Get it.
Well, Julia, we really appreciated having you back at HUI, and it's been fun to see you and fun to have you on our show. So appreciate this time, and
Thanks for
Thank
coming.
you so much
yeah,
for having
thank
me.
you.